the thing I have most confidence in is that 6 months from now, I'm going to have a top 3 priority that today I have no idea what it is. Literally like no idea, not even like a clue. And that is, that is my alpha, right? Is my willingness to like, know that there are unknown unknowns coming, and that we will, find a way to, realize those opportunities when they materialize.
Welcome to Orbit, the HG podcast series where we speak to leaders and innovators from across the software and tech ecosystem to discuss key trends that are changing the way that we all do business. I'm Farouk Hussain, a partner at HG focused on transatlantic software investing. Today, we're diving into one of the most consequential questions in technology. Can anyone actually unseat Google in its search dominance? For 2 decades, countless well-funded startups have tried and failed. But something different is happening in 2025. Gen AI has created the first genuine opening in the search wars since Google itself disrupted the industry roughly 20 years ago. And at the center of this battle is Perplexity AI, a company that's gone from obscurity to roughly 800 million monthly queries in fewer than 3 years. But Perplexity isn't just another ChatGPT clone with search bolted on. They're building something fundamentally different. An answer engine that they believe will replace how we find information online. And in July, they launched Comet, a native AI browser that went GA today. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dmitry Shevelenko, Chief Business Officer at Perplexity. You joined the company in October of 2023, frankly at a time when taking on Google seemed fairly unthinkable. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Excited to keep chatting.
Yeah, so I think we met this summer at HG's senior software leadership gathering in Lucerne, Switzerland. You'll recall that Jeffrey Hinton was our keynote. Love to hear what
I lost in the pickleball tournament. That was the painful memory I still can't let go of, but yeah.
That's right, you did make it to the championship match, and you lost to one of our partners, Chris Fielding. Yeah. And I think you promised 50% of the equity in Perplexity if you lost, if I'm not mistaken. Any takeaways from the event? What did you think? How did you enjoy it?
I think a general takeaway whenever I meet with senior leaders is an understanding that this time it is different. That you cannot wait for others to figure out what AI transformation means for your company, for your industry. That you actually have to be leading to not be behind, rather than in other similar transitions, the smart move may have been let others figure it out, and then we'll copy the best practices. The foundational capabilities are evolving so rapidly that everyone needs to be building ahead.
Yeah. So maybe a good segue to joining Perplexity. So you've worked at a number of very impressive organizations in leadership roles like Uber and LinkedIn and Meta. So what strikes me the most is that, as I mentioned before, joining Perplexity in 2023 did not seem obvious. So what did you see that others didn't?
Well, I was using the product, and I quickly realized I was addicted to asking more and more questions on Perplexity. The last time I felt that was using Uber, and I remembered a similar feeling. My year at undergrad was like the first year that everyone had access to Facebook for the entire 4 years. And so there was a pattern match of like, when I personally get really excited about a new consumer internet product, good things happen.
And how did you discover it exactly?
So I was, I knew about Perplexity. I was introduced through one of the company's Series A investors who thought that, me and Aravind, the CEO, would get along. That's the second reason is I made, a great bet on Perplexity is I saw in Aravind a leader that had a exceptional capability to learn. And I think that's actually, the key trait in this new era we're now all in is how do you quickly, adapt to, new knowledge, new capabilities. I actually first started with a company as an advisor, and I saw, was helping them on some partnership matters. And I saw that after like listening to the way I would approach a meeting, once, the next meeting, Aravind would be able to like perfectly imitate what I was doing. I'm like, oh, this guy's not going to need me after a little bit, which I'm like, okay, I better lock in the full-time equity package before he realizes I'm not that essential. But yeah, an addictive product that I found very useful, an incredible leader, and just an understanding that whether it was going to be Perplexity or somebody else, the way we consume knowledge was going to shift from links to answers.
Yeah.
And kind of the combination of already a great product and a great leader, it felt that Perplexity was very well positioned to be that company.
Got it. And so if you think about the journey, I think today reported $20 billion valuation. I'm sure you won't comment on that, but targeting, I think I read on Perplexity, 200 million of ARR by the end of the year. What fascinates me in the scaling trajectory that you guys have had, you famously told Aravind, I think, that you guys should not chase browser partnerships like Google. Instead, you went after mobile carrier relationships a la T-Mobile and Airtel and Bell Canada, and device partnerships like Samsung Galaxy. So that seems a bit counterintuitive. Help me understand, why did you pursue that route in terms of betting on and focusing on distribution versus the more obvious technical differentiation play?
Yeah, I think, particularly in a 2023, early 2024 context, any distribution partner that Google had, we were not going to be able to pay that partner more than Google was.
Yep.
And so when we were looking at differentiated distribution paths, I was always looking for where could we actually improve the core acquisition or retention metrics for our partner, rather than just us paying them, right? How is there a 1 + 1 = 3, where it's not just we're an advertiser one way or another, but there's some sort of integration that actually improves the core trajectory of their business.
So bring that to life a little. Samsung, you just called them up, or how did that come to fruition?
Well, let's talk about mobile carriers, right? Okay. The crux of the mobile carrier strategy was picking a leading carrier in a given market and working with them on an exclusive basis, right? Yep. Because carriers, they struggle with, being seen as a commodity. And so if you have, a special offer of Perplexity, and we would use Perplexity Pro, which are a subscription version in these partnership structures, if you're able to differentiate yourself through access to Perplexity, that helps carriers tell a much bigger story about why their service stands out against their competitors, right? And so that was, we were trying to find those angles. I can't speak, in more detail about Samsung, but certainly, they also, have a need to tell a differentiation story, and as do other OEMs, and so, we would always look at what are the things we can do that legacy incumbent businesses with legacy business models are not as willing to do, right? We don't have any ad revenue that we will worry about cannibalizing because we don't have any ad revenue, right? And that's a constraint because we can't pay you as much, but it's a huge opening because there's all kinds of ways we can shape our product, that's both good for our users and our partners.
That makes perfect sense. So on the note of differentiation and secret sauce and kind of what makes you special, I think you've raised north of $1 billion from some marquee VCs, a la Excel, Bessemer, NVIDIA, NEA, a lot of individuals like Jeff Bezos, Elad Gil, Nat Friedman, Toby Lutke. So clearly people are seeing that there is some real special sauce here. As I think about it, real-time conversational search with citations, that is what is pretty special about the business. Is that an overly simplistic view of the differentiation? How would you summarize that?
So when I think about the near and midterm future, the thing I have confidence in is that the most scarce resource that will exist in the online economy is trust. And so there's a lot of companies building an AI. What we're building and what we're focused on is building the most accurate AI. And we think that is what knowledge workers, whether they be in their consumer context or an enterprise context, that is what they want. That's what they expect. That's what they find useful. And so an answer engine where you actually can trust the answer, right? And that, That's why we invested a tremendous amount of resources in building our own search infrastructure, our own index, our own ranking, our own retrieval system. And it's all optimized not for 10 blue links. It's optimized for what gets fed into an AI, right? And so when we think about where we invest technical resources, whether it be building search infrastructure, whether it be orchestration, post-training, routers, it's all about accuracy because we think that's going to be what matters the most, not only now, but will continue to matter because the underlying models are going to keep getting smarter. You have to assume that's a given, but what sources, what grounding is fed into them, that there's nothing you get for free there, and that's where we have to keep investing.
And then how do you think about just the evolution of the competitive landscape? So Claude earlier this year launches search, OpenAI upgrades ChatGPT search, and then within that, again using Perplexity, I think of AI traffic, ChatGPT has 78%, you guys are 15-ish%, and then Google's gone all in on AI overviews and AI mode. So just it seems like competitive landscape getting tougher, and I recognize the confluence of things you just mentioned before, and being really focused on that trust element. But how do you think about that evolving competitive landscape?
Yeah, I mean, it's flattering when people realize that what you've been building is the right thing to build, and they try to build alongside that.
Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I would say, what we look at as our kind of key metrics are queries per day and retention.
Yeah.
And the thing that, I think why we've had the success we've had with kind of getting investors excited is when they look at those metrics, they see queries per day skyrocketing and they see retention remaining strong. And usually it's actually, as you expand your user base, your retention starts to fall off because you're acquiring lower intent users. And we actually see, in many cases, the opposite happening, that, as we invest in the product and bring on more users stay around for longer. Ultimately, like, this isn't a 20-25 horse race. Like, we're building, we're aspiring to build a generational company. Yeah. And so we're less focused on immediate market share today versus building for that long-term trajectory. We're obviously honored by the growth we're seeing and trust that users give us and partners give us.
And that's what, 20% month over month right now, directionally?
Yeah, I think that's the last public number we shared, and it's probably a bit more conservative than where we are now. And so that those are the health indicators, and even folks that are adding search grounding into their products to try to catch up to us, they don't have their own search infrastructure, right? So they're using legacy search indexes that were never built for use by AI. Mm-hmm. And when we talk to users and they explain why, they actually ask us, like, why is it that I actually find the answers are better on Perplexity? It's because everything we do, from the search, from the orchestration, it's all about that accurate answer quality, right? And so
how do you measure that in terms of the accuracy or the speed of the accuracy? Like, how do you think about that? How do you quantify that in terms of the ROI or perceived ROI?
Yeah, so I think retention is actually a very honest barometer. Yep. We also run manual evals all the time, and then we also run automated evals. So I think kind of the intersection of those three data points gives us a good sense of the progress we're making.
Okay. Let's talk about browser wars. So I think in August, amidst ongoing antitrust concerns surrounding Google's search monopoly, or at least perceived monopoly, you bid to buy, or your company bid to buy, their Chrome browser for a whopping $34.5 billion. So I was pretty surprised, because looking to buy part of a business that you've publicly said that you're going to disrupt. Did you guys have the financing lined up? Was that a serious offer and bid? Was that more PR marketing? Maybe shed some perspective and light on that.
Whenever there is a very unique asset that could become available, and kind of at that point we didn't know what the antitrust ruling was going to be, the question I'd have is, like, why wouldn't you try to buy it, right? I mean, that's like a billion user product. There's very few of those on the internet.
Sure.
And so, the ability to overnight kind of, serve a much larger audience, and give them access to Perplexity and really great choice for all kinds of other products. That was something that, we thought it would be foolish to not make an attempt. Now, obviously, it was always going to be a long shot, and Google would fight tooth and nail, even if the antitrust ruling was kind of more against them. The thing that surprises me is people ask about the financing. Like, that's actually the easiest part of this. There's so many investors that would love to own, again, a billion user product. Same as with TikTok, by the way. We thought it would be a mistake to not attempt it. We didn't, our plan was not assuming that would happen. Like, we're very committed to comment.
Any heuristics? I mean, TikTok is now, it looks like it's going to settle out at around 14 billion for the US division, 34.5 billion. Any heuristics on why that number?
We looked at kind of, it wasn't our kind of bottoms up analysis. We looked at where industry analysts kind of, where they were quoting the price of Chrome, and that seemed like a reasonable kind of, starting point.
Okay. So that notwithstanding, you've gone on to launch your own native AI browser, Comet, which I think went GA today.
Yes.
So that's really exciting. So some schools have thought genius, and I think that's most schools have thought. Others maybe a little bit distracting in terms of focus. Just help us understand why, our listeners, why now? Why not fully win the search battle? Just any kind of perspective on that, because a lot of other people have tried and been unsuccessful in terms of displacing Chrome or launching their own browsers, like Microsoft, despite kind of owning the operating system. So how do you think about that?
I think to build a truly useful personal assistant, you need context, and you need a lot of personal context for a user. And a browser is integral to that, right? Like, our aspiration is to really be your second brain. And a browser, because you're already logged into all your favorite websites, all the services you use in it, there's just much richer context and grounding that we can use to serve a user better. Yeah. So I think that is like, it's not, there's kind of the first level of like, well, why do this for distribution, right? If you in your own browser, you're the default search engine, and so your query volume goes up, and that's absolutely been true. We see that Perplexity Pro users, once they started using Comet, in addition to Perplexity Pro, their like query volume would increase by a factor of 3 to 4. Which is great. Yeah, and then we were also seeing that 50%, north of 50% of users who got access to Comet were setting it as their default browser, which again was incredibly encouraging for us, because think back to your own history with browsers. Like, when's the last time you change your default browser? It's not like a Comet. Yeah. Exactly, right? Yeah. And so those were. And so, and again, we're seeing even higher retention for Comet than we see with kind of core Perplexity, which already was very high. So the thesis that you could build a better, more useful browser, that's been validated. And I think we're just scratching the surface of what it means to have a AI product that is truly personalized and proactive. Yep. And I think some of what we're going to start talking about with background assistance, and the service evolving, I think more of that will become clear.
So let's talk about Comet Assistant, because that's your agentic play, and I've used it, books meetings, writes emails, manage tabs, and I'm sure that's very simplistic use cases. But what makes that unique and differentiated versus other agents that are available from other companies?
Yeah, well, it's easy, right? You don't have to think about giving it access to specific services, setting up in a certain way. You can just talk to Comet as if have a great executive assistant, and you're interfacing with them. And so it's the frictionlessness of it, and it's the ability to instantly have context, right? The most popular, agentic feature of Comet is the sidecar assistant, where you can just interrogate whatever web page you're on, and you don't have to copy paste. You don't have to, pull in that context. It's all there. And not only is the context of what you're looking at, but what you've been looking at recently, right? So being able to pull in your browsing history, and so
Contextual relevance
and so then it really starts to feel powerful when it's personalized, right? I think most users, it will be a while before they use Comet in a more autonomous fashion, where they're kind of having it do multi-step tasks, that they themselves wouldn't do. So I think what we see, really popular use case is you're watching a YouTube video, ask Comet to summarize it because you don't want to watch the remaining 40 minutes, right? And just instantly to be able to do that and have it right there, that's what creates the wow experience for folks, rather than, kind of power users who are effectively, running, outbound sales marketing, initiatives from, pulling in LinkedIn, Google Sheet information and their email, and kind of orchestrating all that with one query, which is awesome. And it works really well. It takes time for people to learn those behaviors. The immediate context on whatever you're doing on the web, and just making the internet 10% better and more useful, that's where we're seeing the quick win.
Makes a ton of sense. Yesterday, you guys announced the Visual Electric acquisition. Maybe just 2 seconds. Should we expect more acquisitions? How should we think about that? I think camera for the mind, image generator built for designers is how it was described. Any more commentary on that?
So when I'm up at night, like worrying about Perplexity, I don't worry about competition. I worry about our own ability to preserve the rapid execution velocity. And the best way, the thing that makes me feel best, that eases those worries, is when we can bring on more founders into the company. And so when you hear about Perplexity acquiring companies, 99% of the time, it's really about bringing on people that have been operating in founder mode, regardless of whether they're founders or early employees, and ensuring that our culture preserves that. And so that's really, the crux of when you hear about Perplexity M&A. I'm sure at some point there'll be a very big transaction that has a different nature to it, but most deals will be like that.
Anything big on the horizon that you can give some insight into?
I wouldn't be good at my job if I was talking about it on podcasts.
I wouldn't be good at my job if I didn't ask. Okay. And then maybe just on the point about talent, they're very famous in that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, giant pay packages to lure folks from competitive companies a la OpenAI and others. Is that something that you're struggling with to bring on this type of talent that you just alluded to and that you described as so important?
So, we're not in the business of pre-training foundation models. I think and that's a very specialized skill set. And so that's not necessarily the folks that we're trying to bring on. But in some ways the type of engineer we're trying to hire is even more rare. It's somebody that has very good product intuition, product taste, understands what AI can do in a feature and what it can't do, which actually, and then the third layer that's even more tricky is like, what is it going to be able to do 3 months from now that it can't do today? And so bringing on people and that's again where founders who have been kind of building AI products and have developed a really strong intuition around that, and have the right mix of both technical capability and that intuition. That's a really rare skill set, and that's the one we focus on hiring.
Makes sense. So Dmitry, in my research, I was surprised to learn that 25% of your users are Indonesia, 22% India, and 16% in the US. Bull case there, winning where ChatGPT hasn't penetrated. Potential bear case, large in geos where the monetization might be lower. Just what is the right narrative, and how would you describe that?
I'm not sure those numbers are as accurate. One of those numbers seems off. The ultimately, like, we're where we focus our go-to-market and growth efforts are higher GDP markets, and strategic markets. We are honored to have users all around the world, come and use Perplexity, and we welcome that usage. And our product gets smarter with every query we run, right? Every feedback loop we get of seeing, for a unique human query, what was the delta between search ranking and what the sources the LLM use, that makes our engine smarter for everyone. So I think there's there's no such thing as a bad user or a bad query. We certainly are, focused in certain markets more than others. But we're, I think one of the things that is really powerful with LLMs is they are universal translators. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the traditional language barriers that would hold back international growth have not been a constraint for us.
Yeah, so global TAM. Yeah. There have been persistent reports that Apple has been looking to acquire you, that Meta has kicked the tires. I'm not going to ask if you're for sale because I know that you're going to say you're building for the long term like you did earlier. What would have to be true about the market for independence to be the right strategic outcome versus being acquired by a platform that can provide greater forms of distribution for you?
As long as people value accuracy, I think there's going to be a huge market for being an independent leader in this space, because part of having trust and accuracy is independence, right? Is neutrality, and it's being liberated from a legacy business model. And so I think that's where we're uniquely positioned, and I don't foresee that changing.
What is the 5-10 year outlook? What is the trajectory? What can you comment on in terms of what you guys are trying to accomplish? Is it an IPO? What is the end game, and at least in that time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment on a narrow specific timeline, but the way to remain independent is to go public, and that's what we're planning for.
Got it. I listened to an interview that you did recently on Science of Scaling, where you talked about how you guys eat your own dog food. You use Perplexity and I think other AI tools. How do you think about what are the right use cases to be leveraging Perplexity, other AI tools? What kind of returns are you seeing on those efforts? Just how does Perplexity use AI?
I think it starts with a culture of like default to using AI, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some counterintuitive things that come from that. So the types of work products that are easy to produce with AI, we just don't produce them at all. So for example, like internally, we don't make presentations for each other. When we have to work through a problem, we usually create a Slack channel and people share data and kind of share ideas around it. And if it can't get resolved asynchronously, we get on a meeting, and the meeting doesn't start with anybody presenting to the other people because everyone's already had access to the data. It's people asking each other questions back and forth. So no presentation. And yeah, so it is. It's almost like a Socratic modality of problem solving in the enterprise. When we think about hiring, my standard is like it physically has to hurt to add on another employee. Like we literally have we don't like to hire ahead, because then you're not forcing yourself to get all the leverage you possibly could out of the tools that are available to all of us, right?
Do you guys have there's the Shopify Toby memo where he said, no more hiring unless AI can't solve it first. Is that something that you guys adopt or employ?
I mean, I think we're able to, we don't need policies, right? We're small enough where, we can approach these decisions kind of, as one-offs, but it's more the strong bias is like, knowing, every incremental person you bring on, there's a tax to your execution velocity, because there's kind of another step in potential decision-making. Yeah. And so you always want to make sure you're on the right side of is the slight slowness going to be compensated for a greater productivity output?
That makes sense. Any insights into the new AI first world that you've been able to divine from Perplexity's user behavior?
Um, I mean, I think going back to the point about asking questions, like the people that are going to be most successful are the ones that ask the best questions. And so we've certainly had enterprise customers share with us that when they look at usage of Perplexity and then they look at performance evaluations of employees, the best ranking employees are the ones that use Perplexity the most,
Yeah.
which was, incredible kind of feedback to get.
Yeah, for sure.
But that, I think that speaks to, you know, it's about using these things, right? I think sometimes enterprises get a little too hung up on perfecting the ideal workflow rather than just, having employees experiment and then share what they're learning from their own usage and disseminate that across the organization.
Makes a ton of sense. So I think that was really helpful on Perplexity. Maybe zooming out. So I think from our summit this summer, HG, we're software investors. We invest in mostly vertical software, mission critical control points that are deeply embedded in customer workflows. Our point of view is that long-term differentiation and value will accrue to data and distribution and really understanding your customers deeply in that domain knowledge. There are folks that think that OpenAI moving up the stack and going to try and attack kind of the application layer. What's your perspective on kind of what happens long term in terms of where the model and frontier players are going to move, or what are their grand plans?
I think it all comes back to execution velocity, right? Yep. Your right to win, if you are verticalized, is because you know your customer better. You should be able to build faster and incorporate new foundational AI capabilities into useful solutions at a more on a better clip, right? And so, but resting on your laurels of like, well, we're verticalized and we know our customers, and
the complacency does not work.
The complacency, like, and I think sometimes the complacency comes from our customers wouldn't want this, right? Like they're happy with what they have.
Yeah.
And that is, that's certainly not something OpenAI is they're not gonna have that barrier, no. Right? So you kind of, I think that's where like the risk is. Folks that have already been successful in a vertical strategy is kind of internal complacency and assuming their customers are going to be slow adopters.
Totally.
And so that's where I would encourage folks to be paranoid.
I think it's very smart. We're continuing to be very focused on product innovation. And I think what you're saying is basically one of the new moats is just velocity, continuing to innovate, continuing to move very quickly, continuing to experiment. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, something I find myself saying often is the thing I have most confidence in is that 6 months from now, I'm going to have a top 3 priority that today I have no idea what it is. Literally like no idea, not even like a clue. And that is my alpha, right? Is my willingness to like, know that there are unknown unknowns coming, and that we will, find a way to, realize those opportunities when they materialize.
Yep. So maybe just talking a little bit about some of the pattern recognition from your past lives. As I mentioned earlier, you've worked at enormously successful businesses that have scaled a ton. Uber went from startup to global platform. LinkedIn went from social network to monetization machine. Meta recently crossed $2 trillion in market cap. So what are the patterns or things that you can recognize from those experiences that you see playing out here at Perplexity, and especially for your role as Chief Business Officer overseeing a lot of the operations?
I think it is, the commonalities there are like, you can't negotiate on talent quality. You have to build an exceptional team, especially if you want to have a small team. And, building a culture of like self-selection, right? Where like most of the time when I interview folks, I try to talk them out of working here. I tell them all the reasons they're not going to like it and all the things that like I know, might be frustrating.
What kind of things do you tell them?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is this variant of like, we're going to agree on something, and then a month later, because the landscape shifted, we're gonna come to a different decision. And it's this kind of having an eagerness towards waking up, looking at the world with fresh eyes every morning, and leaning into that rather than feeling that that's like a negative. And so, I mean, another way of saying it is, agility and adaptability are euphemisms for thrash. And so, I think that's a common one. I think, we often talk about, folks are coming to Perplexity who've worked a lot in big tech. They kind of need to be rebaptized in the waters of a startup before they can like enter Perplexity, because we don't want to bring in kind of some of those cultural habits. And I worked for a period, in companies that were becoming more big tech. So, kind of had to apply this to myself. It's easy to, bring in those kind of operating biases, and, all of our competitors are effectively $1 trillion companies, or directly bankrolled by $1 trillion companies. And so we're not gonna run a better version of their playbook. We need to always be thinking about what are our unique sources of edge.
Makes sense. So Tortoise was a company that you founded, was a little less successful than some of the companies we mentioned before, or at least a little bit more challenging. Tell us what happened there and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so Tortoise was a robotics startup. We founded it a few months before COVID hit. And so we kind of immediately had to pivot from mobility robotics to delivery robotics, which were both very, very difficult spaces. I think in some ways when I talk about execution velocity, a lot of that comes from painful lessons learned in hardware, where ultimately if I were to diagnose where we went wrong with Tortoise, we did not get to we got a lot of commercial pilot deployments, but the product didn't get reliable enough to scale those up. And we weren't able to iterate, on the quality features fast enough. And hardware is, the cycles are just inherently slow. But I feel we could have done things to move it faster, right? And so
should we rule out hardware from being any part of Perplexity's future then?
It's not something we're focused on, but like I just said, I live in a world where 6 months from now, who knows what we're working on. It's not an area of focus. I do think though, as we think about, there's a lot of excitement now in humanoid robotics, like when the software allows for the execution velocity and iteration on hardware to match that more of software, and you get those clock cycles moving faster, potentially that becomes, a turning point for robotics.
Got it. You were recently appointed to Lazard's board of directors, so congratulations. In that press release, CEO Chairman Peter Orszag said, Dmitry's leadership in AI will help advance our tech-enabled vision for Lazard's future. So maybe share with our listeners, what was the impetus for the move? What are you specifically focused on helping this long-standing and revered financial organization accomplish? What are some of the key metrics that you're focused on? Share a little bit more on that, please.
Yeah, so I'm about 1 month into that appointment. So,
so you've solved all those
I mean, for me, it was, Lazard is, over 180 years old. I feel I'm just learning a bunch, what does it mean to, build an institution that can, truly persevere and evolve. And I was just, it was an incredible opportunity to work with and learn from Peter, who's an exceptional leader who realized that what's happening in AI right now is going to be fundamental to reimagining investment banking and the other businesses, asset management businesses that are part of Lazard. And I think a big part of where I want to be helpful is not just how do you what tools you use and all that. I mean that's kind of table stakes. How do you build the right cultural practices where a longstanding organization can realize that to remain relevant to their clients, they need to be showing this leadership. And so it's not about, top-down mandates. It's about, empowering the incredible teams there to realize like this is how you win.
Yeah, it's both, right? It's top-down and it's grassroots. It's transforming organizations.
And so the fail case is like, oh, the board says like you have to use AI, but people are being forced to use it. That's not going to be the most successful motion there. Yep. It is kind of creating that, like you said, bottoms up excitement. And so yeah, I'm excited to kind of be helpful there.
Awesome. Did you seek that out? Did they seek you out? Should we expect that you're going to join more boards?
It was I was not, I'm, Perplexity keeps me very busy. But when, I happen to know two of the board members and, the first thing I told them is like, I'm only going to do this if I get the better end of the deal, which means I learn more from you that I can, use back at Perplexity than you get from me. And, they agreed to that structure. And so far it's a win-win for both.
That's awesome. Well, congrats. Let's wrap up with a lightning round. So 3 questions. 1, besides Aravind, who is your greatest inspiration and mentor?
My wife.
Good answer. Smart man. Besides Orbit, so the HG podcast, what is your favorite other podcast?
I really like Invest Like the Best.
Yeah.
I like the Founders podcast too.
Those are both very good. And then finally, if not Perplexity, where have or would you put all of your money in AI today?
NVIDIA.
Makes sense. Well, Dmitry, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Orbit, the HG podcast. If you'd like to find out more about HG and our work building enduring enterprises, subscribe to our newsletter at hdcapital.com/newsletters.